All right, let's do this one more time. Now she's recording. All right, CJ, well, welcome to the Entrepreneur Adventure. You are an Amazon lawyer or a lawyer who specializes in selling on Amazon. So, why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got started, and what exactly it is that you do?
Okay, well, I've always represented entrepreneurs. Even when I was still in law school, I started representing fraternity brothers and other people who were buying and selling businesses. And then when I graduated law school, I always had a bunch of entrepreneurs as clients of mine that we would do all sorts of transactions. But I spent the vast majority of my time for a good 10 to 15 years being a trial lawyer. Like I was the guy in court convincing juries that my side was right and the other side was wrong. And then I guess roughly 8, 9 years ago, one of my clients started looking at buying an Amazon-based business. And I was involved in the contract, and then I wasn't, and then I was involved, and then he closed. And within a couple of weeks, with several hundreds of thousands of dollars on the line, his account gets suspended. He reaches out to me, not so much for help, because I didn't really know anything about Amazon at the time, but to let me know that there was a lack of professionalism, a lack of lawyers who could help people with their Amazon issues. And they were really, the sellers were really getting hurt. So I looked into the research and I started seeing who was out there. And at the time, there were two people. One guy was doing it part-time, who was a former Amazon guy. And another was a woman who was still selling. So the confidentiality of people telling her what they were doing was a problem. And she was never like a big-time seller. She kind of, in my opinion, kind of lacked the ability to interact on a higher level with corporate people and significant businesses. You have millions of dollars on the line. Also, she was farming out a lot of work to people in the Philippines. So I thought it was a great opportunity, just like I'm an entrepreneur, just like you and just like all your listeners. And I spent about a year reading and studying and learning and going to Amazon events. And then we launched. And now, from then to now, we've grown to basically, me and one website guy to, I think we're up to 26 people, 22 here in New York, 3 in Shenzhen, China, 1 in Yiwu and Hangzhou, China, and a full-time lawyer in Europe. And the entire focus of the practice is helping Amazon sellers. About 50% has nothing to do with the law. 50% is just writing plans of action for sellers. Inauthentic, you sold as new, high ODR rates. The same college-educated paralegals that write the legal work write plans of action, and we do it a lot better and nothing gets farmed out. And the other half has to do with intellectual property law, which is defending sellers from baseless claims. And also, as more and more sellers get into private label, we help them establish their trademarks, build in intellectual property rights, obtain their trademarks, protect their copyright. We have a patent lawyer who's on what's called of counsel. And since that's where we see the hockey puck going, that's where we think we should be. So our focus is entirely on Amazon sellers, shifting more and more towards the sellers that are going into private label.
Yeah, and it's a big area. I mean, it's just only going to get bigger, and there's a lot of issues with selling on Amazon that you can run into, and it's kind of a new frontier for a lot of people because there's a lot of sellers that are just jumping on there and they've never sold before, and they're just starting to sell whatever it may be without thinking about the legal issues that could come along with if you sell a product and somebody gets hurt with it, or their kid eats it or swallows it and chokes, or whatever the case may be. I mean, there's a lot of issues there that people can run into. So why don't we start there on the private label side of things, and then we'll go through wholesale and retail arbitrage as well. What are the biggest issues that you see people starting out in private label that they're running into legal-wise?
Well, the first thing any private label seller should do, also I want to get back, the obstacles should not prevent anybody from giving this market a try. The obstacles are easy to overcome, and it's a huge opportunity. I mean, just huge. The first thing a private label seller needs to do is first protect their idea and their name and their label. We don't know who's going to be the next Ralph Lauren or the next Under Armour, the next Nike. So as you put time and effort into it, it's really easy for private label sellers to file for their own trademark protection. While we do it as a service, you can do it yourself, and I'm happy to walk any of your listeners. They schedule an appointment with me. I'll teach them how to do it themselves. No charge. But file to protect the name that you develop, and you should also file to protect the fanciful way you're going to write it, like the way the McDonald's M is written or the swoosh for Nike, whatever you come up with. You really should file for protection right away. And then the next issue you face is, as you do it, is you need to protect yourself from whoever is building your products. Your source of goods is your number one threat. It's not the competition. It's your own factory who, if they see the product being successful, will create 100,000 units for you and sell it to you, and then make another 100,000, another 500,000, and sell it to dozens or hundreds of accounts, in China or Vietnam or India, wherever they're operating. So you need to protect yourself both domestically and wherever you're sourcing your products. And those are the top two issues you have to face as you get started.
All right. And so on the trademark side of things, if you don't trademark your product, does that basically mean that someone else can just take your logo and put it on their own product and pretend that they're you?
They can do it, and you can knock them off, because the United States and Europe and most of the world is what's called a first to use state, or first to use system, where if you develop it and you own it, you can knock other people off, even if they file after you, and you could actually oppose that filing or seek to take that filing away. You can challenge it, but it's going to take time, and it's going to cost you money. It's much easier and cheaper to do it at the outset. On the other hand, where you're sourcing your products, and I'm not a Chinese basher at all. I don't think it's right. But when you have one country that has like 90% of all the factories on the planet in one country, that's where the good stuff comes from and the bad stuff comes from. So China is a first to register, a first to file. So it's just easier and cheaper and efficient to do it early on. If you didn't do it yesterday, then put it on your list of to-dos for tomorrow. And again, it's in the US, it's really, really easy. China's a little more complex.
Okay. Yeah, and something to keep in mind too is that the Chinese culture is different than what our culture is here, where here we kind of think of it as a bad thing of taking someone else's stuff and running with it. In China, that's kind of expected, that if someone's being successful, you just copy them and do the same thing and try to be successful yourself. So not necessarily right or wrong, it's just two complete different cultures, and you got to keep that in mind, that you're dealing with a culture that may not be or think the same as what we do here about taking someone else's stuff.
That's entirely correct. And we grew up, and when you were a kid, if you told someone they were being a copycat, that was a bad thing. That doesn't exist in Chinese culture. So we've learned a lot by our team in China, and that's exactly right. Also in the United States, there are different presumptions. In China, if you don't file in the specific categories, there's hundreds and hundreds of categories, you're presumed not to have rights in those categories, where the presumption is the opposite here. In fact, China had no IP law at all until 2012. Absolutely zero. But now that they have, and I don't know if you're a Trump fan or anti-Trump, and I don't want to get into politics, but in terms of it, in terms of intellectual property, I read a report that there are 15 times as many filings in the U.S. coming from people located in China than the U.S. and Europe combined.
Okay. So they're filing trademarks and patents here in the U.S. for products that they're making in China, the Chinese.
That's right. They're protecting their rights here as well as there at 15 times the rate. Also, the government there supports them. So U.S. sellers, you really do need to start protecting yourself early, and it's cheap and easy. You can do it yourself.
Yep. Yeah, definitely. And with the trademark too, you have to have that now with Amazon to register your brand and protect your listings on Amazon. Because if you don't register your brand, then you don't maintain control of your listings, and anyone can be changing your listings. But if you register your brand, those listings that are using that brand are kind of locked down for you, and that people can't just change them to whatever they feel like.
Yeah, 100% right. 100%. They could also sometimes change the back end. You used to be able to get the registry 1.0. I'm not sure if you still can. They call it the deprecating 1.0. But to get into 2.0, you have to have the mark.
Yep. Yeah, they've completely moved on to 2.0. I've got one brand that's registered under the 1.0, and I don't have it trademarked yet. And they keep warning me that I need to get it trademarked or I'm going to lose that. So I got to get that done here pretty quick. So I might have to talk to you about that after the show here. But a little bit more about the supplier issues. What can you do to protect yourself from a Chinese manufacturer supplier from stealing your product and your logo and trademark?
Okay, you got to do really two things, and you really should do them simultaneously. One, you have to develop guanxi with your factory, which means a relationship, that face-to-face relationship with your factory or the factory manager. And it's a long flight, but it's not as awful as it sounds. You have to go and visit them. You have to let them get to know you. You have to spend some time with them so that if they then sell your products out of the back door, they lose face. If there's no relationship, there's nothing culturally that's going to stop them from doing that. In fact, it's good business. So you need to develop a relationship with your factory, and you need to maintain that relationship. I mean, it's absolutely vital. The second thing you need to do is you should file in China. Once you have the mark here in the US, you can do a WIPO application. It's the World Intellectual Property Organization. And it's like $300. It's really cheap, and it gives you some protection in China. But you really should file with the Chinese lawyer in China and hit all the different subcategories that you're in or that you intend to go into. What it will do is it'll give you leverage so that either one, the factory won't screw you over and won't sell your products out the back door, or if they do, you have some leverage to communicate with them in a face-to-face meeting and show, we filed, here's the contract, and we don't want to get the government involved either, but you have to stop selling our products to other sellers. And those mechanisms work. It really is not much litigation on these things. If you walk softly, you have a relationship, and you carry a big stick of having filed, you should not have much of a problem.
Okay. All right. So just having the threat there basically solves most of the problems.
I like to call it leverage.
Leverage. Okay. Sounds good. It's probably a better term. But let's say they do go ahead and do that. Is the Chinese government, are they willing to protect American interests over there from their own citizens?
Increasingly they are, especially in some of the hot spots. There's a whole battle going on the last couple of years as to which Asian country or city is going to be the IP capital of Asia. You have Hong Kong battling Shenzhen, battling Singapore. So in some of the provinces like in Beijing or Shanghai or in Shenzhen, the courts are very open to hearing you out. But I believe in court avoidance, okay, at all costs. If you can avoid going to court, I think it's the best thing. There are other mechanisms. Since the Chinese are mostly selling here in the US, if you have the mark, okay, and they're taking your mark and sticking it on their product, they're very easy to get off. If they're selling the same exact product, then you need to be a little more creative, and that's one of the things that we focus on. We're not allowed to say we specialize in anything as lawyers in New York, so we focus on it. Okay. We focus on what we can add to that product or add to the warranty of the product, so that nobody else can deliver the same thing. Like if you're selling like a health and beauty item and it includes a license to log on to a part of your website that gives health and beauty advice, no one else can sell that license other than you. So they might be able to sell the product on the one hand, but they can't also deliver that license so that the consumer is not getting the same thing. It's almost like buying a new car. A new BMW with the warranty is worth $50,000. Without the warranty, not so much. Mm-hmm. So you need to add something to your product that gives you the ability to knock off, we call them hijackers.
Sure. Yep. And that's always a big issue on Amazon, dealing with hijackers. And what I've done is I just have a cease and desist letter that I don't remember where I got it. It might have been from Scott Volker over on The Amazing Seller, a template from him. And it basically just says to stop selling the product, that they're not authorized to do that. And if they continue to do that, we'll report them to Amazon or possibly pursue legal avenues. And 99% of the time, that seems to get them off pretty quickly. Is there any issue with sending that kind of letter? Is that okay with Amazon terms, or what is your thoughts there?
No, we do the same thing. I would just change the verbiage a bit, because authorized sellers versus unauthorized is specifically something that Amazon will not enforce.
Okay.
So I would identify something else, but it's really easy to do. We have the same success rate where when you send those letters, most sellers just want to go on doing their business and not risk their account. And they'll either stop selling or they'll contact you and they'll say, hey, listen, I've got 1,000 units left. Can I sell these out? And then we'll move on to something else. I think also by doing that, rather than making a complaint, you're not needlessly killing somebody else's business. You know, everyone has mouths to feed. And you're also avoiding the animosity that comes with making a complaint. You know, I don't think it's wise, business-wise, to go nuclear, right? Because then that seller, their staff, their cousins, brothers, mothers, children, right, can buy your products, return them, and all of a sudden your ODR rate goes through the roof. Or they'll make complaints against you as a buyer and cause you problems. So yes, send the C&D letters. I would take out the authorization language of it, and it's very, very effective. And then I would at all possible work out agreements so that people amicably come off your listings.
Yep, definitely. And I've softened up mine a little bit after getting some replies, and I'm like thinking, maybe I don't need to be quite so harsh. So a lot of these people are just, they're just trying to sell products, and they're not necessarily trying to do anything wrong. For example, when my very first products that I listed on Amazon were these bed sheets that I was originally selling on eBay. And I just found a listing. I'm like, yeah, that looks like the same product. I sent it in and sold on that listing. And I never got a cease and desist or anything, but months down the line, I'm like, oh, I was a hijacker, because that was some of these branded products. And I had no idea what I was doing coming from eBay. That's not an issue. You just list your product and it doesn't really matter. So could be something that simple. It could be malicious. You never know. So
most of the time it's not malicious. Most sellers don't want to get involved in disputes. We negotiated a settlement a few months ago where when the complaint came in, our client had already ordered, like 2 containers full of this particular product. So we negotiated with the other side's lawyer in California, worked out just a licensing agreement where, X dollars or X cents per unit would get paid to them. Our seller continued to sell. They continued to make, roughly the same profit. And when our client's inventory is gone, she'll stop selling and move on. And I think those agreements are best for everybody because they avoid all the problems. It's so easy for a buyer or 10 buyers to make complaints and just capsize you. Mm-hmm. So I believe in working things out amicably, trying to avoid court. We're not afraid of court. I've tried more cases that if you took every lawyer you knew and added up their courtroom experience, I have more than all of them combined. Mm-hmm. It's not a place for small and medium-sized businesses. The only ones who make out well are the lawyers. So we try to avoid that as much as possible, even though from time to time, you have to go to court to get a restraining order. You have to go to court to free somebody's money, to get leverage over them. Mm-hmm. Or you have to respond in court. But we try to avoid it at all possible.
Okay. All right. Very good. So why don't we move over to like the wholesale side of things for people who are buying products that are branded either from distributors or directly from the manufacturer or wherever suppliers are coming from. Are there any specific issues that wholesalers need to watch out for?
I think you do. I think first you want to try and get distribution agreements if you can. Okay, they're not required. Amazon doesn't enforce distribution or authorization agreements. But if you can get authorization, it's just going to avoid problems down the road where they won't make complaints against you. Or if you're caught up in a net against hijackers, you can easily get out of it. So that's number one. Number two, I would certainly just watch the forums, listen to webinars like this, make phone calls, and do some research before you invest too heavily in any particular brand or product. The health and beauty industry has had a tremendous crackdown on people selling their products, even though most of their complaints are like 100% baseless. But you may want to do some research before you bet the farm on like Johnny B hair products, because they're very aggressive, even though their complaints are totally ludicrous. Okay. If you get a letter from a law firm like a Voorhees or somebody else out there, don't freak out. Most of the IP complaints out there are entirely baseless. I mean, that's one of the reasons why we're so successful, is that the complaints have no grounds in the law. That's where you can get them dismissed over and over and over again.
Hmm.
But I would first try and get distribution agreements. And then number two, do some research, because if you can avoid a dispute and make money elsewhere, I just think it's a better thing to do.
Okay. So the distribution agreements, that's something you would get directly from the supplier. Like I do have some agreements with certain suppliers, but other ones, not really. They just send you their product list and start selling. So if that's the case, do you recommend requesting one from them, or do you have like a template that we can use to send them and get it signed?
Yeah, we can send you a template. It's no big deal. It'd be no charge. We can send it out to you.
Okay.
Number two, those authorizations usually come from the brand or a brand manager, or maybe a little bit lower on the food chain to your source or your distributor. We want to try and get those. Also, if you can't get that, you really want to keep fantastic records of your invoices that show where you purchased it from, that can then show a link back to the brand. The number one reason for ASIN suspensions or account suspensions is still this thing called inauthentic. And it's not claiming that your products are fake. They just want to see where they came from. So if you buy it from ABC distributor, you want to be able to show that ABC distributor gets it from, Hasbro or Marvel or NFL or wherever the product is made, or whoever the brand is. You want to be able to show a chain all the way back to manufacturer if you can. And that can be done in several ways. It could be right on the invoice. It could be right in the documents. It could be as simple as pictures of the distributor with like the Marvel truck pulling in, or copies of their invoices if you can get them. But you certainly want to get good invoices. And I've learned a ton about what you want the invoices to have on them and what you don't want your invoices to have. And it's a whole separate subject. But quality invoices are vital, because Amazon will give you this inauthentic complaint, and then you have to give them the invoices.
Okay, so for the invoices, I'd assume in today's world, digital invoices are okay. You don't have to have physical paper copies.
We almost always use paper copies. Almost always have actual paper invoices. We do have electronic ones from time to time, but when we're submitting to Amazon, we almost always have paper, and we want paper. There's certain things you want to see on that invoice. You don't want a pro forma invoice that was made on Excel. All right, any invoice, right? On the left-hand side, you've got where you bought it from. Distributor name, address, website, phone number. You have to make sure that website exists. You have to make sure that phone number works, okay?
Mm-hmm.
You have to know if you Google Earth it, it's going to look like a business. It's not somebody's home or like an empty field. It has to be real. And Amazon is more and more and more calling the distributors to see whether they sold, to you, okay? On your side of the invoice, you want to have like, your name, your address, your phone number, your website, but everything should match the Amazon account. So if you're selling under like, ABC Table Supplies,
Mm-hmm.
right? Buy your products under ABC Table Supplies. The email address on your invoice should match the email address on your Amazon account. Your phone number should work. Everything should match. And many sellers will violate Amazon's rules, which is totally fine with me, and they'll operate multiple accounts. But you should also then maintain invoices in the names of each of those multiple accounts. We know Amazon looks to see if the fonts all match. They're not all different sizes. Don't redact the prices, even though they say it's okay. It is a problem. You want to make sure that it shows that it was paid. You want to make sure the dates of delivery make sense. If you got in trouble on January 1st, you can't submit an invoice from March 1st, right? The quantities have to match. If you shipped in 10,000 units, you can't show an invoice for 5.
Yep.
You also want the invoice to have as much detail as possible. You don't want any handwriting on the invoice unless there's a place for it. If there's a place for a signature, somebody should sign it, okay? These are some of the things we've learned by handling all these non-legal suspensions, writing plans of actions for inauthentic. So get good, high quality, very detailed invoices.
Okay. So as far as, I'll first just talk about the multiple seller accounts. So I do have 2 accounts with approval from Amazon. So
I was going to say, stop the video.
Yeah, no, they are okay with doing it as long as you get their permission. So I opened up a case and told them why I needed a second account for business purposes, because I have 2 completely separate parts of my business. One part I may eventually sell, so I need to have it separate. And they were okay with that. I got approval, and I have those emails saved and records of that saved, and they know the name of the new account and everything. So, it's against terms unless you tell them and they approve it. Then they're okay with it. But if they find out you have a second account without getting approval, then they could just shut you down completely.
Yeah, I gotta tell you, I'm a business lawyer, okay? I'm a business lawyer, so diversity is the key of business, where you don't have all your eggs in one basket. Mm-hmm. By having multiple accounts, you are taking on the added risk of getting caught. And there are certain things we know you can do to avoid getting caught, but we don't know everything, so you still may get caught. So you're taking that extra risk. On the other hand, if you only have one account, your entire livelihood is based upon one account, where your best ASIN or your entire account gets shut down, any day at any time. So there are many, many sellers that we work with that have many, many accounts, and they do it very well. There are other sellers that as soon as they start having more than one account, they get caught, and it's a major problem. So everyone does things differently. Everybody has different skills. The most successful people we've seen in multiple accounts are either in specific areas of Brooklyn, New York, are in Shenzhen, China, or they literally have 6 computers with 6 different hotspots, with 6 different bookkeepers and 6 different product lines, and they never log on from the same phone. And they walk around with these bags full of computers, and they're religious about not crossing account from account. And they do a lot of things themselves, because if you have, let's say, for example, the same bookkeeper, right, who's logging in and pulling reports for you. If that bookkeeper blows it and makes a mistake, your accounts get linked and you go out of business for a while. So if you're going to do it, you have to be incredibly careful. And again, but there's no Amazon police out there, at least not yet. Okay, yeah. So if you have related accounts, you're not going to prison.
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend doing it without Amazon's permission, because personally, I wouldn't want to take that risk of getting my accounts shut down and lose the entire business that I've spent years building up. So not a risk I would want to take, which is why I went and got complete permission from Amazon to be able to separate the accounts. But even with that permission, one of the stipulations in there is that the 2 accounts cannot sell the same products, because they don't want me to have multiple listings for my same product and be able to take up more spots on the search results than just one.
Right. You also, even if you have their permission, you have to be careful that if you lose a product on one account, you don't just boost it on the other one. That's another way of violating their terms. So you really want to be careful, if you do have their approval, how you use the approval, and don't abuse it, because you do have that. A lot of people can't get it. So if you have it, certainly don't risk losing it.
Yep, definitely. All right. So anything else we should talk about on the wholesale side of things before we move on?
No, there are some great courses out there. This is a great source of information. I'm a big fan of Eddie Levine and Wholesale Breakthrough. You can learn a lot from him. And there's just a lot of places that sellers can learn from on how to be more efficient, how to be more productive. And I like the Amazon sellers events for 2 reasons. One, you learn a lot, okay? And number 2, you get inspiration. So for those 2 things, I would recommend that sellers, get knowledge from a broad base of sources.
Okay. Well, let's talk a little bit more about the getting the suspensions or Amazon suspensions for inauthentic products. So let's say that I'm buying from a company. I have the invoices and everything, but Amazon says that they're not legitimate. I submit those invoices. Amazon confirms that maybe the supplier that I'm buying from is selling me illegitimate products. What happens then? Where is the legal liability in that case? Not only on the legal side, but also what will Amazon do?
On the legal side, we see practically no liability arising. Theoretically, could there be? Absolutely. There's a certain amount of statutory damage you could be liable for, but we see practically zero of that. It's usually just a seller dealing with Amazon, or even when a brand is complaining, they just basically want you to stop. there's a few brands out there that are more aggressive. Usually they're more aggressive towards offshore sellers. But I think that the risk is very, very minimal of getting stuck in court and that sort of thing. It exists, but it's really small. When it comes to Amazon, it's all about your plan of action. That response you write to Amazon, that we do it. We probably send out 10 to 15 plans of action a day. Everything is written here in New York. Nothing is outsourced. And I'm happy to also teach the listeners how to write it and how to write it in a way that we find that works. So let's say a seller bought items from a well-known distributor, and then it turns out that distributor was doing something shady, and he ended up with counterfeit products, right? Well, the root cause of your problem, right? I'm sorry, let me take a step back. A plan of action should have 3 sections: root cause, immediate corrective action, and a long-term change to your business so that Amazon's not going to have a problem with you in the future. The root cause, you want to write in some positive way that you're now going to source your products someplace more reputable. You don't want to admit that you sold counterfeit products, because then if Amazon refuses to amicably put you back on, you're dead in the water. Where if you just write it with different verbiage, you can always take Amazon to arbitration to get your account reinstated without Amazon's consent. They can actually be ordered by an arbitrator to reinstate your selling privileges. So the root cause should identify how you're going to do it better, and every business can do something better. The second, the immediate corrective action, you should always refund the consumer their money. Any complaint at all, even if they're pulling a scam on you, even if the product is 100% fine, give them a refund. They can get it from the A to Z system anyway. Offer to send them another one, offer to send them another 2. Just do anything you can to try and make that consumer happy. The third section, this is a little more thoughtful. It's trying to figure out how you can make the whole operation of your business better. And there, it's really something you have to describe, like in this particular scenario, how you're going to research and find a new distributor, or how you have already researched and identified a new distributor and traced their products back to the manufacturer, so that you and Amazon can be assured that the products are in fact genuine. Mm-hmm. And that's the basics of a plan of action. That's what we do every day, and it works. We used to find that persuasive sentences were working more, then bullet points were more effective. Now it seems like sort of a combination is what's working. The whole exercise is just an exercise in persuasive writing, trying to convince or persuade whoever's reading it in Hyderabad or Bangalore to reinstate your ASIN or your account, rather than asking for more information or saying no.
Okay. All right.
I'm sorry, that was such a long answer.
No, that was great. That was great. So one thing that I have run into is I've contacted a manufacturer directly about selling their products, and they told me that they're not interested in having more Amazon sellers. But down the line, I ran into a distributor who is selling their products and is willing to sell them to me to sell on Amazon. Is there any issue there legally?
The fantastic and wonderful gray market, okay? Those products, just about every product, you can buy it and you can sell it, and under U.S. law, you're not violating anything at all. It's called the first sale doctrine. As long as you're not changing that product and the consumer is not getting something materially different than what they would get from any other seller, you're not violating anything. It doesn't mean they won't make a complaint or send you a cease and desist letter, but then you're right. You're not doing anything wrong. And I think then you have to make a business decision as an entrepreneur, risk versus reward. How much are you going to make on that product? What's the risk of having a problem? Even if you're going to win that fight, you still do that analysis. If it's to pick up 3 units of NFL jerseys right before the Super Bowl, when the NFL is going, bananas, knocking sellers off, bad decision, right?
Yep.
If it's 100,000 genuine New York Giants jerseys that you can get for $1 each and sell them for 50, and you can show they're genuine, right? And it's not right before the Super Bowl, then go for it. There's a lot of money to be made. So everything, in my opinion, is risk versus reward.
Sure. So you have on the legal side, we would say that there's not really too much risk there, but Amazon doesn't necessarily worry about the law and just shutting down your account if they think that you're selling fraudulent goods or something like that. And then you have to go through the process, and it can take weeks or months to get that back up. And in the meantime, your business fails and goes under. What kind of recourse do people have there if they weren't doing anything wrong, but Amazon shut them down anyways?
All right. First of all, you're going to be stunned. Okay. When I learned this, I was shocked. I thought that the person I learned it from, I had to ask them the question twice. The people reading these things, these complaints, are called the MPA team. I don't know what it stands for. They're in India. As far as I'm aware, they have zero legal training. I mean, zero, like none. There's no paralegal there. There's no lawyer there. They haven't been taught about trademark or copyright or patents. Zero, okay? So they get these complaints. And they do. They knock people off willy-nilly as if it's nothing, as if no one's livelihood is depending upon it. The way we address those, you receive the C&D or you receive the complaint. We then contact the complainant as your lawyer. We say, hey, listen, we're an IP firm, right? We know Amazon, we know IP law. Your complaint is entirely baseless, and this is why. And you should withdraw the complaint because you're causing damages that you're responsible for making this baseless complaint. And those letters, I don't know if it's because they come from a law firm, okay, or just because they're being called to the carpet, they withdraw their complaints, more often than not, where, there might have been 20 sellers on their product and only one of you stands up to them and they withdraw the complaint. If they are either silent or they refuse to withdraw the complaint, then you go to notice dispute at Amazon.com, and you see that right in that email. And we will refer to our own legal opinion letter to show there's no violation, there's no IP rights. It's a genuine product being delivered in the same exact fashion. And that is also remarkably successful at then getting Amazon to ignore the complaint. There's a third mechanism called a counter notice that pertains to copyright complaints, where if it's baseless complaint, a seller can serve a counter notice under the Digital Millennium Copyright Act. And then that business has 17 days to either sue you or their complaint disappears as a matter of law. And if it's baseless, generally they're not going to sue you, especially the smaller brands. So those are kind of the three mechanisms. And you shouldn't be too concerned. You shouldn't flip out if you get a complaint, because most of the complaints are entirely baseless under the first sale doctrine. And you were right. You were totally legally permitted to buy and sell that product any place you want, even though Amazon tends to overreact.
Okay. So in your history, how long does it usually take for someone to get reinstated if they do get shut down in that way?
If it's an IP complaint, you're generally looking from about 2 weeks, a week to 2 weeks, between contacting the other, if it's a lawyer or a brand manager or the brand itself, and either they respond in an affirmative way, or you have to go to notice dispute. So if it's an IP, an intellectual property complaint, an IP complaint, you're probably looking at a week to 2 weeks on average. Some take much longer, especially if there's like a complaint by a lawyer in like June or July, and I reach out to the lawyer and he says, hey, listen, I thank you for contacting me, but tomorrow I'm going on vacation for 2 weeks and I can't look at it till I get back. Sometimes life interferes with business. On the non-legal suspensions, you're looking usually about a week. We've heard nightmare stories where people are out 2, 3, 4 months, and that whoever's writing the plans of action are taking, 10 to 15 days for each revision. It's usually about a week for your non-legal suspensions and about 2 weeks for intellectual property suspension. Sometimes a lot faster, sometimes a lot slower, but that's generally what occurs.
Okay. All right. I feel like there's some room here for like a class action lawsuit against Amazon or something.
I'll tell you what I was thinking about. I'm not a big fan of class actions lawyers, and I was involved in mass torts long ago. I had a full head of hair. What we are seeing a ton of, and we are exploring right now, a ton of times where Amazon is just seizing people's money, right? So they have like $7,000 of your money, and they accuse you of violating blah, blah, blah. And they just say, we're not going to distribute it, or we're going to hold it. But they don't just hold it, they seize it. And we're seeing this occur more and more and more. And even if you sold a counterfeit product, let's say you sold 10,000 units and 1,000 of them turned out to be counterfeit, I don't see where Amazon gets off seizing all of your money. Mm-hmm. So we're exploring how to handle that. Amazon sellers each waive their right to go to court in exchange for the right to go to arbitration. But I think we're talking like tens of millions of dollars a year, if not more, of just money that they have seized. And often for each seller, the amount is so small, it's not worth the fight, or it's not worth poking the bear. So my partner and I have a weekly partnership meeting. We're going to talk about this. What can we offer sellers on a group level where Amazon just has seized their money? Mm-hmm. You know, we don't call it this. These words are not mine. But one of a person I spoke with, I think they were at one of the Las Vegas events. It's, you know, FBA. They called it TBA, theft by Amazon.
Okay.
So
yeah.
we're exploring what to do about it.
I love selling on Amazon. I think it's a great platform, and I'm making a lot of money doing it. But as with everything, there's always issues, and I feel like Amazon is kind of eating its own right now, and I got a feeling it's going to come and bite them here a little bit, which especially if they get some kind of competitor who can take them on, which would be really nice. Because even though Amazon is great, when you get one platform that's just kind of taking over all of e-commerce, they become the big bully, and they can kind of get away with it because I don't want to be the one who says anything and get my account suspended because Amazon doesn't like me. You know, so
I tell you, I agree. And I think even with all the warts on it, they've given, I think, one of the, if not the greatest, one of the greatest opportunities for regular people to get into, you know, commerce around the world. I mean, really, with like a credit card and your cell phone, you can start selling on Amazon. But there are certain issues. In Europe, they don't have as much of a market as they do here. We're like the only country, I think, where they have like, where it's like 63% of the market right now, like something crazy. But there definitely is going to be, I think, some reckoning. A lot of us had hoped that Jet and Walmart, they had said they were going to treat sellers a whole lot better than Amazon as a way of building up their market. I don't really know if that came to fruition or not. I don't really get the feeling from sellers that they're being treated better, you know, by Jet and Walmart. But hopefully someone comes along that recognizes the benefit the platform gets by the sellers that are on it.
Yep. Something will come along eventually. I don't know if it's going to be Walmart or Jet. I don't know if they can make that shift or not. Maybe. We'll see. But either that, some upstart will figure out something new just like Amazon did, and eventually it'll happen. You know, we all always thought Microsoft would be king of the world, and now Microsoft too, kind of thing, you know?
Yeah.
You got their operating system on your desktop and your laptop, but more and more people are just using their phones and everything else. So they're kind of being pushed down, just like IBM used to be the big name. And now Google is being beaten up by Facebook, and they're taking over a lot of their ad dollars. So technology keeps going, things keep changing, and we're in a world that where what used to take 100 years to happen now is happening in 10 years or less. So
yeah, you also see, you know, not only I think is the stock price of Amazon affected by President Trump, the perspective changes. You know, I mean, love him or hate him, you know, a lot of people listen to the President of the United States, and when he says things about Amazon being not being fair in terms of using the postal service, I'm not commenting at all whether that's accurate or inaccurate, but things like that can affect the perception of a brand. You know, like me personally, I hate the idea of Amazon Go. You go to a supermarket, I want to see people there checking out because they need jobs, you know? So I think that's a huge detriment. So I think public opinion will have some effect. And I think the president may have sort of started something where people are looking twice and saying, you know, yeah, I get my stuff, you know, next day and it's great, but what are the negative implications of them? And I think that could happen in terms of sellers. And it could help change it for the better.
Yeah.
Also, most of the people listening to this and selling on Amazon don't remember Ma Bell, right?
Yep.
You know, the whole country, one phone company, and all of a sudden the government said no go and broke them up. Is that a future of Amazon? There'll be regional Amazon. I don't know. But I think that sellers should start thinking about joining together. There's a merchants guild that's being created by a couple of people here in the Northeast. One of them's a law professor. at Pace University School of Law. He's a tax lawyer. I hope to have more news about it and to be able to tell sellers, listen, you need to donate to this. This is going to be like our lobbying group. So hopefully that'll get off the ground soon.
Yeah, and that's how I would prefer to see it. I always hate the government getting involved in things, especially technology, because I think they just ruin it more than they help, and slow down the advancement of technology especially. So I hope they stay out of that, because if they do regulate Amazon, I think it just more cements them as the leader, and makes it harder for new people to get into the game. But that's my opinion. I'm a small government guy, a libertarian, so I prefer the free markets and stuff like that. But I definitely know exactly what you're saying with like the Amazon Go and stuff like that. It's kind of nice to have a retailer there or someone checking you out, but at the same time, it would be kind of cool just to grab my stuff and leave. So we got to find that balance. And
yeah, people need jobs. I mean, I'm a big believer in technology. I was like first to jump on the Palm Pilot and the Boss, Casio Boss, and technology. I love it. But people need jobs. Americans need jobs. At least that's my opinion. Hey, before I go on that soapbox, can I do a promo for something else? Total different change of directions.
Sure. Go ahead, and then after that, we'll move in and talk about some retail arbitrage stuff.
Okay. Most of us who are making a living some way or another associated with Amazon also shop on Amazon. When you shop on Amazon, you can pick Amazon Smile, which is a program Amazon has, and it's a fantastic program where they donate a small portion of your purchase to the charity that you pick. It doesn't cost you anything extra as a consumer, and there's a lot of great stuff that Amazon does. They help employ vets. They have the Amazon Smiles. They go into poor neighborhoods with fresh food. There's a lot of fantastic things Amazon does, and this is one of them. The charity that I would ask you to pick, if you don't already have one, is called the Ty Lewis Campbell Foundation. It was founded by a fraternity brother of mine and his wife after they lost their son to brain cancer. Ty Lewis Campbell Foundation. It's a remarkable group of people that raise a lot of money solely to focus on childhood cancers. So Amazon Smiles, Ty Lewis Campbell Foundation, and I can send you the link and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, definitely. We can put it in the notes down below the video here. And I'm sorry for your loss. It's never a fun thing to deal with cancer, and it seems like everybody gets cancer nowadays. It's just horrible.
Yeah, it was my buddy, and for a knucklehead of a guy, really an incredible father, an incredible man, and his wife is fantastic. Developed this foundation. But all right, retail arbitrage.
Yeah, no, and just for everybody, if you go to it's smile.amazon.com, and I've actually used it. I forget to use it sometimes because my Amazon tools that I use don't work on smile.amazon.com, so I always forget to go there. But I've definitely used it, and it's definitely nice to be able to donate a percentage of your purchases to charity with no additional cost to you. So definitely check that out, and I'll put that in the notes for you. But yeah, as far as retail arbitrage, so this is probably where the biggest legal issues come in with people. I'll just start off with a story of my own. So I started in Amazon in retail arbitrage is where I really got my feet wet, and I've since moved more into wholesale and private label, but I still do some retail arbitrage. And one of the most recent problems I've ran into was with Skullcandy. They make headphones.
Yeah, very familiar with them.
So I was selling their product. They sent me a cease and desist letter from a law firm, and I replied to them that I bought these items at clearance, and I'm just reselling them. When they're gone, they're gone. And then I got paperwork in the mail, basically all this legal paperwork, the same thing.
Those are from my friends over at DeVore's law firm.
Yeah, it might have been. I forget the name of them.
Tyler, Whitney, a couple other guys over there. On the bottom, that's whose signature was over.
Okay. All right. So what kind of, do they have grounds there, or what should I do in that case? I ended up taking the product down because usually the grounds are total BS that we see. Okay. Mhm.
We've dealt with Skullcandy before. I don't think there was anything in their warranty or their product. And if you were selling genuine Skullcandy headsets, you were not violating anybody's intellectual property rights. And that letter, in my opinion, is entirely baseless. It should never have been sent. We've
Okay.
also seen, Voorhees also, if you do research on the Voorhees law firm, they have this whole video about how they automate brand protection, right? So it seems to me, and again, I don't work for them, although I've met the guys a couple of times, that they're just sending these letters out without anybody even looking at where they're going, because it's automated. They have a whole animation on this stuff. So they send them out. The letters are baseless. Voorhees is very rare, if ever, will withdraw their complaint, but Amazon is very acceptable to ignoring them, okay? So that we've dealt with that. We call it the Voorhees letters. We've looked at, I don't know, countless Voorhees letters. So we've been very successful getting Amazon to ignore it when Tyler and the other lawyers over there refuse to withdraw their complaints. We've even recently saw a letter where a client of ours bought items at Kohls, right?
Mhm.
And just like you can buy stuff at Kohls and sell it in a garage sale, you can buy stuff at Kohls and sell it online. Okay, there's no difference. It's the first sale doctrine. And Voorhees actually sent out a letter that said, you can't do this, right? And it was absurd because, okay, well, Kohls took their money. They now own that property. And they weren't claiming to represent the brands. They were just representing Kohls department store. And the letter was just ridiculous, okay? So I wouldn't be too worried about those letters. They are part of doing business. If you want to try and avoid those brands, even though you're right, it may just get less stress in your life. And when you do your risk-reward benefit analysis, it may be better for you not to get involved. But like your headphones were most likely 100% legitimate and fine. Just had to then persuade Amazon to ignore their complaint. And just like Amazon had a problem with like some of the refund companies that were out there for a while, I don't want to name names. I think Voorhees has overdone it. They've done too much buckshot. I think Amazon as a company seems to take their letters a lot less seriously than they used to because they just do so many of them. So I wouldn't be too worried about the Voorhees firm, at least right now. And Voorhees, if you're watching this, I still think you're good guys. But I think your letters are bogus.
Yeah, and that's kind of was my thinking as well. I only had one or two left, so I just pulled them out and I said I'm not going to worry about it. But that's good to know. So if I would have just ignored them, what do you think? Would they have taken it any further? Would they have filed a lawsuit or anything like that, like they claimed to, or is it just they're trying to just making claims with no ammunition behind it?
I don't want to draw a lawsuit. Like I don't believe in I don't be like mano a mano and challenge them. But let's take your situation. I think you're pretty good.
Okay.
I don't think you should lose any sleep worrying about someone's going to serve you with papers tomorrow.
Sure. Yeah, and that's part of the reason I opened up the second Amazon account. I'm moving any of my private label, or not private label, all of my retail arbitrage stuff over to that account. And my thinking is that if there's a claim like that and Amazon closes that account, it hopefully won't affect my other account since that account is in good standing and didn't have the violation on it. So that's kind of my thinking there. Maybe Amazon might connect it over and shut that one down, but at least there's a little extra barrier there to if there's any false suspensions on Amazon part.
I'd say we haven't seen that happen at all. If you have Amazon's approval to have a second account, we haven't seen any connection between products on account A with products on account B.
Okay.
If they don't have their permission, they link them up, they shut both of them down.
Okay. All right. Very good to know. So, yeah, and my thought is on it, I've kind of ignored those letters. The Skullcandy one was the first one that they actually sent me in the mail. So I'm like, well, I'm not going to worry about it. It's just a couple products. I pulled it off and I actually returned them back to Shopko and got my money back for them. Yeah, I'll just have to, going forward, I'll just have to kind of ignore those letters. And basically, in my mind, I just make note of those brands and just don't buy them anymore. If they don't want my money, I'm not going to buy their products, I guess is the way I look at it.
A lot of times what we do, even if the cease and desist is entirely baseless, we send out a quick, it's kind of a form letter that says we have looked at it, we take it seriously, and we disagree, and here's our response to it. So it's kind of silly because I don't know how much they're charging Skullcandy to send out their Voorhees letter for us to then send out our form. I know our rates are a whole lot more reasonable, and we do it really, really quickly.
Mm-hmm.
But I think if someone is writing a letter, there should at least be like a recognition, like just out of respect, we received it, we take it seriously, but we disagree, or something to that effect, or we're looking into it. Just the way we see things. As you know, most people, especially in corporate America, answer to somebody. And if you can imagine in that room, did you send out the Voorhees letters? Yes. How many did you send out? 100. Did you get responses? Right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think when someone is called to the carpet out there, yes, I got a response from these 98. Good. Focus on the 4 that blew you off. So I'm not really sure if that is entirely accurate. That's the way we see things. And it's so quick and easy to respond. Just simply say we received it and we're looking into it. Done deal. That's it.
Okay. You wouldn't recommend saying something about the first sale doctrine or something like that?
No, we do. We spell out why there's no violation. Okay. But just quick and easy, just to let them know you received it and to respond, I would send something back. We do. We go through, there's basically 4 areas of intellectual property law: copyright, trademark, patent, and trade dress. Mm-hmm. So we have a letter that identifies each of those categories and why there's no violation. So we send that out. My staff could probably do most of those letters in 10 or 15 minutes for any product. Okay. Just respond to it and say, you're wrong. And don't make a complaint, or else you may be responsible for the losses. And sometimes the losses are financially relatively small, but have serious consequences, like, a single mom raising a child, right? And say, listen, you'll be responsible for taking away the livelihood of this single mom in Wisconsin, okay? And we're not going to let that happen idly, okay? Let them know there's some problem to the brand if they do this, or significant income. If you're employing 20 people and you're doing, $2 million a month, right? Voorhees could be held responsible for those losses. Yeah. So I think you identify why, one, you received it, you took it seriously, why they're wrong, and their potential liability, and that usually stops it, at least in terms of the Voorhees letters.
Okay. All right. Yeah, and I think we're in kind of like the wild frontier right now, where people are just trying lots of little things and they don't know what's going to stick, what's going to work, what's legal, what's not legal. And hopefully that'll kind of sort itself out. Amazon will start taking this stuff a little more seriously and not just suspend people's accounts for basically illegal reasons when you really come down to it. So one brand that people will probably want me to touch on, because there's a lot of conversation on it right now, is reselling Nike shoes. So Amazon has that gated, but for example, myself, my seller account has 800 positive feedback, and I have very good standing, and I was able to get ungated for Nike shoes. But a lot of people are worried that Amazon is going to send cease and desist letters, and Amazon's going to shut down your account. What have you seen there in terms of that, and what grounds are there?
Well, Amazon is a private business, right? So they can make up whatever rules they want. There's no due process that you're entitled to. Mm-hmm. If you end up taking Amazon to arbitration, there are certain laws in the state of Washington which governs the contract, and the Federal Arbitration Act that would govern. You don't ever want to go there. My advice is to stay away from it. If it's a gated brand and you're not already heavily invested, there's no reason to pick a fight that you don't need. So I would tell the listeners, and listen, I'm a David versus Goliath guy. Okay, I love the fight, but it's not always good business. So I wouldn't recommend anyone starts getting into Nike. If they have the opportunity and there's something really great there, then they might want to apply first to see if they can get in. But something like that, it's just, to me, it's not worth the risk.
Sure, and I guess where I was going with that is I am ungated. I bought a few Nikes, sent them in, sold them. Haven't had any issue. Have you had clients that have had their accounts shut down from selling Nike?
We've had clients who lost the ASINs from Nike. I think we've had some account suspensions, but we haven't faced your scenario where you're ungated and you're allowed to sell and had a problem.
Okay.
I haven't faced it yet. And also, by the way, if anybody out there ever tells you they know exactly what Amazon's going to do, they're full of it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Really.
Amazon, one of the great things about the company is that they allow their employees to make decisions for themselves to inspire creative thinking. One of the bad things about the company is that individual people that work there make different decisions than the guy sitting next to them.
Oh, yeah.
Because they're allowed this freedom. So I would say run of the mill, we haven't seen people who were ungated have any problems, and I wouldn't start selling things that are gated.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I hear you on that with Amazon. I pull my hair out some days trying to deal because one person will tell me something. I'm like, no, you can do that. That guy just did it for me. And you go back and forth on that, but that's a whole nother story. So
also, they don't treat all sellers the same. And it could be the same size seller, same age seller. And they just, you see someone else selling that same product and you're getting dinged for it. Why? I don't know. Yeah. But there's a Cajun saying that it's easy to ride the horse in the direction that it's going. Right?
Yeah. So, and I've got the one account that's about 3 years old and has 800 positive feedback, 99% positive feedback rating. And I've noticed that probably in the last few months, maybe 6 months, it's gotten immensely easier for me to get changes to listings and get things done. And they're just like, basically, yes, sir, we can do that for you. I guess there's probably a benefit of sending in $10,000 to $20,000 in fees to them every month. They listen to you a little more.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to hurt.
No, definitely not. All right, so let me take a look at social media here and just see if we have any questions. Let me check my Instagram account here first. All right. So we've got one question here from Flip Kings on Instagram. Do you have to be an authorized reseller for a brand to sell same brand on Amazon? So I think what he's asking, we kind of touched on already about do you need to be an authorized reseller of a brand to sell it?
All right, the answer is no, you absolutely do not. You can buy and sell just about anything you want in the United States without authorization or permission, but some brands just might be wise to stay away from.
Yeah. Yeah, it depends on what kind of headache you want to deal with.
Yeah, so how much money do you anticipate making? If it's a small amount of money and a big headache, stay away. If it's a tremendous amount of money and a headache, maybe it's worthwhile.
Yep, definitely. So got to weigh the benefits and costs and negatives and positives of that one. All right, let's jump over to Facebook and see what we got. Reload the page here. All right, here we got one from Alex. What are the top 3 most common cases you deal with? What are the top 3 biggest mistakes made by Amazon sellers that open themselves up to litigation or risk?
All right, litigation. There's very, very little actual litigation, okay? I don't want you to not be concerned about it, but I don't think you should lose sleep over litigation. There's very, very little. There's very, very few lawsuits, although they are increasing a bit against domestic sellers, okay? Top 3 are inauthentic, where they just want to see your invoices. Number 2 is used, sold as new, where people are receiving products that either look a little bit old or damaged, or the packaging is like last year's packaging. It's not the same as what it looks like in the store. And the 3rd are baseless intellectual property complaints. Someone is claiming that you shouldn't be selling OtterBox cell phone cases or something. Even though they have no grounds to do it, they still make the complaints. So inauthentic, you sold as new, and IP complaints. Inauthentic and you sold as new have nothing to do with the law, although we write tons of those plans of actions every day.
Okay. Yeah, so it really comes down to you're probably not going to be taken to court, but how much risk are you willing to take with Amazon? Because they can choose to suspend your account basically for any reason, and then you have to prove that you didn't do anything wrong.
Yes, but the litigation risk is very minimal.
Okay. All right.
So far, that's what we've seen so far.
Yep. Yeah, and that's good to know. At least you don't have to lose sleep over losing your house because you sold.
And what what we're seeing, the litigation that we're seeing the most of isn't against domestic sellers at all. I mean, there's some. It's usually like a brand suing John Doe 1 to 500, but John Doe 1 to 500 actually sellers located in China. So the vast amount of litigation that exists is against foreign sellers, and the litigation locally, domestically, it's really minimal. You'd be surprised. It's very minimal, at least right now.
All right. So just lots of threats flying around, not a whole lot of follow through.
Yes.
All right. Very good. Let's see if we got any more here.
Right. You know, one form of litigation you asked about early on, you asked about insurance and liability if, like, you know, it harms somebody, a product harms somebody. Amazon requires you to have liability coverage, although most sellers don't, and we have yet to see Amazon ask to see for the certificate of insurance. But as a business person, you should create an entity to protect your personal assets, and you should buy liability coverage. It's very inexpensive. We always recommend Ashland Haddon out of Indiana, who's really focused on e-commerce sellers and their insurance needs.
Okay.
Cheap, and it's easy. It's required. I don't know why they haven't plugged away at it to get rid of sellers, but they haven't. But it provides two things that are vital. One, if your product hurts somebody, right, it'll pay whatever the losses are. But more importantly, they'll actually provide lawyers to defend you. And that's really vital. The obligation to defend by an insurance company is probably more important than the obligation to indemnify for losses. Because if you have to walk into your local lawyer and get defended, it's going to cost you an arm and a leg.
All right. And so that is, I know that's extremely important, especially if you have a private label brand, to protect if somebody hurt themselves with your product. How important is that if you're just selling other people's products? Because if somebody got hurt with their products, wouldn't they be liable, or would you still be liable as the person who sold it to them on Amazon?
You know, as a former plaintiff's lawyer, okay, and I tried cases, car accidents and employment cases and medical malpractice. When you're starting a lawsuit for someone who is injured, you're casting a net for everybody who's involved in that product. Okay. Everybody. And everybody has to defend themselves. So like in your Skullcandy example, if one of your headsets, you know, caused someone to lose, you know, their hearing or damage their hearing, they would have sued everybody, including you. And if you have insurance, you just call the carrier, like in your car accident, and say, hey, listen, I'm getting sued. And they would assign a lawyer to defend you. In New York, it's very rare that cases get dismissed until after depositions and after, you know, it takes about a year to get there. So you'd have to defend yourself that entire time. So the insurance provides lawyers to do that for you, where you basically make a phone call and then you're done dealing with it and you can go about your business while the lawyers defend you on somebody else's dime. Okay.
And what was the name of the company you said?
It's Ashland Haddon, H-D-D-E-N, and she's in Indiana. It's Ashland Haddon Agency or Ashland Haddon Insurance or something like that.
Okay.
As far as this area, I think, one, I like her and we're friends. I don't get anything from anybody if you use any of the vendors that I suggest, but she's nice, she's very responsive, and she knows her stuff.
Okay. All right. Yeah, and that's extremely important in the Amazon space because it's a whole nother animal. A lot of people could sell you the insurance, but getting someone who actually knows Amazon is very important to get the specifics there.
Yes. Yeah, it is. So you need someone who kind of knows our space.
Yep, definitely. All right. Very good. That is all the questions that I'm seeing so far. So anything that we haven't touched on that you want to touch on?
No, I'm really grateful for you having me on. I think this is a really great webinar. And thank you. And just the Amazon Smiles and the foundation, Ty Lewis Campbell Foundation. A lot of people would take this opportunity to promote themselves. I'm not going to do that. But smile.amazon and the Ty Lewis Campbell Foundation.
All right. Well, I'll promote you for you. Your website is AmazonSellersLawyer.com. The website looks awesome. You've got awesome information for us here. You seem to really know what you're talking about. Where can people, what's the best way to get a hold of you if they either want some of the sample forms we talked about, or maybe they have something bigger and their account's suspended and they need some help?
Sure, they can call us. Amazon doesn't give you anybody to speak with, and we know you need to talk and explain what's going on. So the phone number is 877-9, and the word sellers, SELLERS. You can email me at cj@amazonsellerslawyer.com. The sellers is plural, lawyer is singular. We're on Facebook, and we're on Twitter. We're everywhere. So I would say the best way is to just call or email, or send me a note on Facebook. Any of those three.
Okay. All right. Perfect. And I'll put all that information in the notes as well. I really appreciate you coming on. This has been a lot of awesome information, and information that I needed to know and that everybody's going to really appreciate, I'm sure. So I appreciate it, and look forward. Maybe we'll have another interview sometime down the line as things progress on Amazon.
It'd be great. I'd love to be back on. Thanks a lot.
All right. Appreciate it, CJ. You have a good one.
You too.
Thanks. Bye. All right. Let me stop recording.